The morning sun cast long shadows over Seoul International Xenological Institute's gleaming towers. Students of various species hurried through the halls, creating a vibrant tapestry of colors, shapes, and sizes. Among them, Lyra stood out with her iridescent scales that caught and reflected light in mesmerizing patterns. As a centaurian, Lyra moved with natural grace, her body flowing like water through the crowded corridors. Her four eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, took in everything around her with keen interest. She had traveled across 3 galaxies to study at Earth's premier Xenological Institute, and now, finally, she was about to attend her first advanced human biology lecture. The classroom was already half full when Lyra entered. She chose a seat near the front, carefully adjusting her specialized chair to accommodate her non-humanoid form. Around her, students from dozens of worlds chatted and prepared their data tablets. Some gave her curious glances. Centaurians were rare even in this diverse setting. Professor Hanjia entered precisely as the clock struck 9. She was tall for a human, with straight black hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her movements were measured and purposeful, so different from the liquid grace of Centaurian professors. Lyra found herself fascinated by how the professor's joints bent at sharp angles, how she walked with such deliberate steps. "Welcome to Advanced Human Biology," Professor Han said, her voice clear and steady. With a wave of her hand, she activated the classroom's holographic system. A 3-dimensional image of human musculature appeared, floating in the center of the room. Today, we begin with what makes humans unique among known species, our remarkable ability to adapt and grow stronger through stress. Lyra's translator hummed softly as it converted the professor's words. She leaned forward, all 4 eyes focused intently on the hologram as it showed a microscopic view of human muscle fibers. The concept of beneficial damage was completely foreign to her. Centaurians either healed back to their original state or suffered permanent injury. When humans exercise, Professor Han explained, manipulating the hologram to show muscle fibers tearing and rebuilding, we actually create tiny tears in our muscle tissue. Instead of just healing these tears, our bodies rebuild the muscle stronger than before. A student raised their tentacle. But wouldn't that be extremely painful? Why would humans deliberately damage themselves? Professor Han smiled. The process causes some discomfort, yes, but humans have evolved to find this particular type of stress rewarding. Our bodies release endorphins, natural pain-killing chemicals, during exercise. Many humans actually enjoy the sensation. Lyra's scales rippled with excitement as she recorded every word. On her homeworld, any form of deliberate tissue damage would be considered a sign of mental illness. Yet here were humans, not only damaging themselves systematically, but growing stronger because of it. The lecture continued with a demonstration of human temperature regulation. Professor Han brought out a small device that measured heat output and invited students to observe as she performed a series of quick exercises. Lyra watched in amazement as tiny droplets of water appeared on the professor's skin. "This is sweat," Professor Han explained, wiping her forehead. "It's our body's natural cooling system. As the water evaporates, it carries away excess heat. This allows humans to maintain physical activity for extended periods without overheating." Lyra's classmates murmured in appreciation. Most species had to rest frequently during physical activity to prevent dangerous temperature increases. Some used external cooling systems for prolonged exertion, but humans had this elegant, built-in solution. After class, Lyra lingered, watching Professor Han pack up her materials. The humans' movements continued to fascinate her, so rigid compared to Centaurian flexibility, yet somehow beautiful in their efficiency. She gathered her courage and approached the professor's desk. "Professor Han," Lyra said, her translator giving her words a slight electronic accent, "I found today's lecture incredibly interesting. I have never encountered a species that grows stronger through deliberate damage before." Professor Han looked up, her dark eyes warm with interest. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, Lyra. Humans are indeed unique in many ways. I see from your registration that you're here on a specialized research track. Yes, Professor. I'm particularly interested in comparative physiology between species, the way humans adapt to stress. Lyra's scales shifted to a deeper blue, indicating intense excitement in her species. It's amazing. Where I come from, we avoid all forms of physical stress. Our bodies are meant to maintain perfect equilibrium. Perhaps, Professor Hand suggested, you would be interested in our advanced research program. We're always looking for fresh perspectives, especially from species with such different biological paradigms. Lyra's scales nearly sparked with joy. I would be honored, Professor. There is so much I want to learn about human biology. Your species seems to defy so many universal constants. As Lyra left the classroom, her mind was already racing with questions and possibilities. She had come to Earth expecting to study an interesting species, but now she realized she might be researching the most fascinating biological system in the known galaxy. The way humans not only survived stress, but grew stronger from it challenged everything she thought she knew about life itself. This was just her first day, her first class, and already the humans had completely upended her understanding of biology. She couldn't wait to learn more about these remarkable beings who turned damage into strength and stress into growth. As she made her way back through the crowded halls, Lyra knew she had made the right choice in coming to Earth. After 2 months of intensive study, Lyra had filled 12 data tablets with notes and observations about human biology. Her quarters at the student housing complex had become a miniature research center, with holographic displays showing human anatomical systems covering every wall. She spent her evenings reviewing lecture recordings and comparing human healing processes to known species across the galaxy. One morning, she arrived at Professor Hand's office an hour before classes began. Her scales were shifting between excited purple and nervous green as she clutched her research proposal in her upper appendages. The door was open, and she could see Professor Han reviewing student work on her holoscreen. Professor Han, Lyra called softly, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. May I have a moment of your time? The professor looked up and smiled, gesturing to the specially designed chair kept for non-human students. Of course, Lyra, you're here quite early today. Lyra settled into the chair, her scales now fully purple with excitement. I've been working on something, Professor. A research proposal. She transmitted the document to Professor Hand's screen with a gentle wave of her appendage. Professor Hand began reading, her eyebrows rising steadily as she scrolled through the detailed proposal. Lyra had outlined a comprehensive study of human healing mechanisms, with a particular focus on how they might be adapted to help her own species. You see, Lyra explained, her translator struggling to keep up with her enthusiasm. Humans are absolutely remarkable. When you break a bone, it doesn't just heal, it becomes stronger at the break point. This defies everything we know about injury response. Professor Han nodded, continuing to read. The proposal was incredibly detailed, showing how Lyra had spent countless hours studying human medical records and healing patterns. And your skin, Lyra continued, her scales now shimmering with multiple colors. Every few weeks, you shed all your outer skin cells and replace them. Without even thinking about it, Centaurians keep the same skin their whole lives. We just repair damage when it happens. The professor paused at a particularly interesting section. You've hypothesized that human healing mechanisms could help address the genetic degradation in the Centaurian population. Yes, Lyra's scales flashed brilliant gold. Our species has been struggling with increasing genetic stability issues. Each generation, our healing abilities become slightly weaker. But humans, you have these amazing repair enzymes that not only fix damage, but sometimes make improvements. Professor Han set down the data pad and looked at Lyra thoughtfully. This is very thorough work, Lyra. But I notice some of your proposed research methods might need adjustment to comply with human research protocols. Lyra's scales dimmed slightly. What do you mean, Professor? Well, Professor Han said gently, you've proposed taking tissue samples from human subjects during various stages of physical stress. While this could provide valuable data, we have strict rules about how and when we can collect samples from test subjects. Lyra's upper appendages moved in a gesture of confusion. But humans are so resilient. Surely a few small tissue samples wouldn't cause any harm. It's not about physical harm, Professor Han explained. Humans have strong feelings about bodily autonomy and privacy. We need informed consent, proper documentation, and approved research protocols before we can conduct any physical studies. The professor pulled up a new document on her screen. However, I think we can modify your proposal to work within our ethical guidelines. Your basic premise is fascinating, and the potential applications for both our species are significant. Lyra's scales brightened again. You'll help me adjust the proposal. Of course. Your work could be groundbreaking. We'll need to add sections on subject consent, data privacy, and safety protocols. We'll also need to submit it to the ethics board for approval. For the next hour, they worked together, refining the proposal. Professor Han explained the importance of human research ethics, helping Lyra understand that respect for individual autonomy was as fundamental to human society as genetic stability was to Centaurian culture. There's one more thing, Professor Han said as they finished. I think you should work with a human research partner on this project. Someone who can help you navigate the cultural aspects while you focus on the scientific side. Lyra's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. That makes sense, though I hope they'll be as interested in the research as I am. Professor Han smiled. I have someone in mind, one of our top graduate students. They're actually studying Centaurian biology, so you might have quite a bit to teach each other. As Lyra left the office, her scales had settled into a deep, satisfied purple. Her proposal would need work, but with Professor Han's guidance and a human research partner, she was one step closer to understanding the fascinating mysteries of human biology. She headed to her next class, already wondering about her future research partner. Humans might have strict rules about research, but their bodies held secrets that could help both their species. Lyra couldn't wait to begin the real work of unlocking those secrets, even if she had to learn some new protocols along the way. The research lab was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment when Lyra met Kim Da for the first time. He was tall and lean, wearing the standard white research coat, his dark hair neatly combed. Lyra's multiple eyes took in every detail of his movement as he walked toward her, noting the efficient way humans use their bipedal structure. Hello, Lyra, he said with a warm smile. Professor Han told me about your research. I'm looking forward to working with you. Lyra's scales rippled with excitement, shifting to a bright purple. Her translator converted her response into clear human speech. I'm very excited too. I've never had the chance to study human biology up close before. Would you mind if I took some preliminary measurements? Before Kim Da could answer, Lyra had already moved closer, her sensory appendages extended to analyze his muscle structure. He stepped back quickly, nearly bumping into a lab table. Whoa, maybe we should start with the basics first. He laughed nervously, maintaining a careful distance, like setting up our research schedule. Lyra's scales dulled slightly in confusion. But we're both here now. Wouldn't it be more efficient to begin collecting data immediately? Your muscle structure is fascinating. Over the next few weeks, similar scenes played out repeatedly. Lyra's enthusiasm for human biology frequently led to awkward moments. She would ask to measure Kim Da's temperature during different activities, request skin cell samples at random times, and once tried to scan his bone density while he was eating lunch. One particularly memorable incident occurred during a staff meeting. Lyra, excited about a new discovery regarding human sweat glands, reached out to collect a sample from Kim Da's forehead in front of the entire research team. The room fell silent as Kim Da gently but firmly moved her appendage away. After the meeting, Kim Da asked Lyra to join him in the break room. He made himself a cup of coffee while gathering his thoughts. Lyra watched with interest as the steam rose from his cup, noting how humans could consume hot liquids that would harm many other species. Lyra, he began carefully, We need to talk about boundaries. Her scales shifted to a questioning blue. Boundaries. Have I made an error in the research protocols? Not exactly, Kim Da said, taking a sip of his coffee. It's more about human personal space and comfort levels. When you reach out to touch me or collect samples without warning, it makes me uncomfortable. Most humans feel the same way about unexpected physical contact. Lyra's scales darkened with embarrassment. But how can I study human biology without direct observation and sampling? We can still do all that, Kim Da assured her. We just need to plan it properly. Set specific times for data collection, get proper consent, and maintain professional distance during regular interactions. Lyra processed this information, her scales slowly shifting to a thoughtful green. On my world, physical boundaries are different. We share everything about our biology openly. It's considered normal to examine each other's physical characteristics at any time. Kim Da nodded. That's fascinating. Maybe we could include a comparative study of social norms in our research. Understanding these cultural differences could be valuable for future xenobiological studies. As they continued talking, Lyra began to see how human social customs were intricately connected to their biology. Their need for personal space, their complex social rituals, even their reactions to physical proximity. It was all part of what made humans unique. Over the following days, their working relationship improved dramatically. Lyra learned to schedule her observations, ask permission before taking measurements, and respect Kim Da's need for personal space. In return, he shared more about human customs and helped her understand the social aspects of human biology. During one of their scheduled research sessions, as Kim Da voluntarily allowed her to measure his muscle density, Lyra made an interesting observation. Your heart rate is lower now than during previous measurements, she noted. Kim Da smiled. That's because I'm comfortable. When people feel their boundaries are respected, they're naturally more relaxed. This revelation led to better research results. Their subjects were more willing to participate when they understood the process and felt their boundaries were respected. Lyra's data became more accurate as her human volunteers were more relaxed during measurements. As weeks passed, Lyra and Kim Da developed not just a successful working relationship, but a genuine friendship. They would often share meals in the break room, discussing the differences between their species and cultures. Lyra learned to recognize human social cues, while Kim Da gained a deeper understanding of Centaurian perspectives. One day, as they were reviewing their latest data, Kim Da noticed Lyra's scales showing a new pattern he hadn't seen before. What does that color combination mean? He asked. Lyra's translator hummed as she replied. It means contentment and belonging. I'm learning that understanding humans involves more than just studying their biology. Your social customs, your boundaries, your ways of interaction, they're all part of what makes your species remarkable. Kim Da smiled, touching his coffee cup to hide his emotion. I think we're both learning more than we expected from this research partnership. The lad was quiet at midnight, with only the soft glow of holographic displays illuminating the room. Lyra and Kim Da had been working for hours, comparing human cellular patterns with archived Centaurian genetic data. Most other researchers had gone home, leaving them alone with their work. Let's run that analysis one more time, Kim Da said, stifling a yawn. He picked up his 7th cup of coffee, the liquid now cold and bitter. Lyra's scales flickered with tired blue patterns as she adjusted the holographic display. They had been testing a new theory about human cellular regeneration, hoping to understand why humans could heal and grow stronger from injuries that would permanently damage other species. Suddenly, Lyra's scales flashed brilliant gold. Kim Da, look at this pattern. Her appendages moved rapidly over the controls, enlarging a section of the display. These human cellular structures, they're almost identical to ancient Centaurian genetic patterns. Kim Da nearly spilled his coffee as he hurried to her station. The display showed human muscle tissue regeneration side by side with historical Centaurian genetic data. The similarities were striking. "This can't be coincidence," he said, his fatigue forgotten. "Your species lost this regenerative capability over generations, right?" Yes. Lyra's scales were now pulsing with excitement. Over thousands of years, our genetic structure became more rigid, more perfect, as our scientists called it. But looking at this now, her voice trailed off as she manipulated the display. They spent the next few hours comparing more data. The evidence was clear. Human cellular regeneration followed patterns remarkably similar to those found in ancient Centaurian genetic records before their species began experiencing genetic degradation. "This could be the key," Lyra said, her translator barely keeping up with her excited speech. "If we can understand how human cells maintain this flexibility while remaining stable, we might be able to help my people." The next morning, running on excitement and caffeine, they presented their findings to Professor Han. She listened carefully, her eyes widening as she understood the implications. "This deserves a full faculty presentation," Professor Han decided. "Can you prepare something for tomorrow morning?" They worked through another night, preparing slides and organizing their data. Lyra's scales hadn't settled to a single color in hours, shifting between excited purple and focused green. The presentation room was packed the next morning. Faculty members from multiple departments filled the seats, and several screens showed observers from other research institutions. Lyra began their presentation, explaining the genetic degradation problem facing her species. Everything was going perfectly until she reached the section about human cellular regeneration. In her excitement to demonstrate the similarities, she grabbed Kim Dae's arm and pulled him forward. "Look at his muscle structure," she exclaimed, her appendages moving over his arm. "The way human tissue responds to stress is remarkable. Kim Dae, could you remove your shirt to show them?" The room fell silent. Kim Dae turned bright red, gently extracting himself from her grip. Professor Han cleared her throat loudly. "Perhaps we should stick to the slides," Kim Dae suggested quietly, his face still flushed. Lyra's scales dulled to an embarrassed gray as she realized her mistake. She quickly returned to the presentation, focusing on the data rather than live demonstration. Despite the awkward moment, their findings generated enormous interest. After the presentation, faculty members surrounded them with questions and suggestions for further research. Later, in the break room, Kim Dae found Lyra still showing embarrassed gray scales. "I did it again, didn't I?" she asked. "I got too excited and forgot about human customs." Kim Dae laughed. "Well, at least you didn't try to take samples this time. Remember last month?" Lyra's scales lightened slightly. "I'm getting better though, aren't I? I haven't tried to measure your temperature in at least 2 weeks." "Progress is progress," he agreed, pouring them both some coffee. "And hey, the breakthrough we made is worth a little embarrassment. This could really help your people. If we can understand how human cells maintain their regenerative abilities without losing genetic stability." Lyra's scales shifted back to excited purple. "We might be able to develop a treatment for Centaurian genetic degradation." As they discussed their next research steps, Lyra reflected on how far they'd come. Not just in their scientific work, but in understanding each other's species. Every mistake and breakthrough had taught them something new about bridging the gap between their cultures. "Kim Dae," she said suddenly, "thank you for being patient with me. I know I can be overwhelming sometimes." He smiled. "That's what makes you a good scientist, your enthusiasm. Just maybe don't try to undress me in front of the faculty again." Lyra's scales rippled with amusement as her translator conveyed her laughter. Together, they began planning their next phase of research, both aware that they were on the verge of something that could change both their species for the better. It started as a normal day in the lab. Lyra and Kim Dae were testing a new theory about human cellular regeneration using a controlled radiation chamber. The experiment was routine. They had performed similar tests dozens of times before. The containment field glowed with its usual soft blue light as Kim Dae adjusted the settings. Lyra monitored the readings from her station, her scales showing focused green patterns as she recorded data. Ready for the next test sequence, Kim Dae called out, checking the safety protocols one last time. He had always been careful with lab safety, double-checking everything before proceeding. Then everything went wrong. The containment field flickered, its blue glow suddenly turning angry red. Warning alarms blared through the lab. Kim Dae, get away from there. Lyra's scales flashed emergency crimson as her sensors detected the field's collapse. But it was too late. A burst of radiation filled that section of the lab. Kim Dae stumbled backward, his face pale. Lyra's multiple eyes watched in horror as the radiation sensors spiked to dangerous levels. She slammed her appendage on the emergency shutdown button and activated the lab's decontamination protocols. Medical teams were already rushing in, alerted by the automatic systems. "I'm fine," Kim Dae tried to say, but his legs gave out. Lyra caught him with her lower appendages, careful not to cause additional stress to his system. The next hours were a blur of activity. The medical team rushed Kim Dae to the Institute's specialized treatment center. Lyra paced outside, her scales shifting between worried gray and anxious yellow. The doctors wouldn't let her in at first, concerned about cross-species contamination. Park Sun joined their research team just when they needed her most. She specialized in cross-cultural scientific communication and had experience working with various alien species. The first time she watched Lyra practice a presentation, she knew they had work to do. "Maybe we shouldn't start with the detailed cellular breakdown images," Park Sun suggested gently after Lyra finished her practice talk. "And the live demonstration of human muscle stress response might be a bit intense for a human audience." Lyra's scales shifted to a confused blue. "But the data is fascinating. Don't humans want to understand how their bodies work?" "They do," Park Sun explained. "But there's a difference between understanding and feeling like a specimen under a microscope. Let's try telling the story of our research instead of just showing the raw data." They spent weeks refining the presentation approach. Park Sun taught Lyra how to read human audience reactions, when to pause for questions, and how to present sensitive information without triggering discomfort. Their first major conference was in Seoul. The audience included scientists from 20 different species. As Lyra took the stage, her scales showed a nervous pattern of green and gray. "Before I begin," she said, her translator perfectly conveying her careful tone, "I want to share a story. On my world, we believed we had achieved genetic perfection. But that perfection came with a price, one we didn't understand until we began studying human biology." The audience leaned forward, captivated by this personal approach. Instead of jumping straight to cellular images, Lyra walked them through the journey of discovery. She talked about the accident with Kim Dae, carefully avoiding the more graphic details, focusing instead on the implications of his recovery. During the question period, a human scientist raised her hand. "Isn't it dangerous to suggest modifying Centaurian genetics based on human patterns?" Park Sun watched proudly as Lyra handled the question with newfound diplomatic skill. "We're not suggesting direct modification," Lyra explained, her scales showing calm, professional patterns. "Rather, we're learning from human adaptability to better understand our own genetic history." After the conference, requests for collaboration poured in from both human and Centaurian institutions. Park Sun helped them set up a cultural exchange program, where scientists from both species could work together while respecting each other's boundaries and customs. "It's amazing," Kim Dae commented one day, watching Lyra teach a human researcher about Centaurian biology. 6 months ago, you would have been scanning their cellular structure without asking. Now look at you, the perfect cultural ambassador." Lyra's scales showed a pattern of amused acknowledgement. "I learned from my mistakes, and from good friends who helped me understand that science isn't just about data, it's about the people we're trying to help." The research lab became a model for cross-species collaboration. They developed a set of guidelines that helped different species work together comfortably. Simple things made a big difference, like designated personal space zones, clear communication about physical contact, and respect for different species' comfort levels with various types of research. Park Sun organized regular cultural exchange sessions where team members could learn about each other's customs. During one session, Lyra explained why Centaurians shared biological information so openly. In our culture, understanding each other's physical state is a form of caring, she said. When I first arrived, I didn't realize that humans show caring in different ways. The humans in turn shared why they value privacy and personal space. These conversations led to better understanding and more effective research practices. One day, as they were preparing for another conference, Park Sun noticed something interesting. Your presentation style has completely changed, she told Lyra. You're not just sharing information anymore. You're building bridges between species. Lyra's scales showed a deep, satisfied purple. I realize that our research isn't just about solving Centaurian genetic problems. It's about helping different species understand each other better. Their work began to influence other research teams. Scientists from various species started adopting their protocols for cross-cultural collaboration. The Institute even added a course on cross-species cultural sensitivity to its research training program. As their influence grew, Lyra found herself becoming something she had never expected, a cultural diplomat as well as a scientist. She was no longer just studying human biology. She was helping build understanding between species. You've come a long way, Kim Dae told her one evening as they reviewed data together. Remember when you used to try to scan everyone who walked into the lab? Lyra's scales rippled with laughter. And now I ask permission first. Though I still think humans are fascinating, I just express it more appropriately now. Together with Park Sun, they continue to develop new ways of sharing scientific knowledge across species barriers. Their work was proving that understanding between different species wasn't just possible, it was essential for scientific progress. The lab had become more than a research facility. It was a place where different species learned to work together, respect each other's boundaries, and share knowledge in ways that benefited everyone. And at the center of it all was Lyra, who had learned that the best scientific discoveries come from understanding not just biology, but the beings they were trying to help. The grand auditorium at Seoul International Xenological Institute was filled beyond capacity. Scientists from Earth and Centauri Prime sat side by side, waiting for Lyra's final thesis presentation. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation. Kim Dae sat in the front row, fully recovered from the accident that had changed their research direction months ago. His presence gave Lyra confidence as her scales shifted through nervous colors before settling into a determined purple. Professor Han introduced Lyra to the audience, highlighting how this research had grown from a simple study of human biology into something far more significant. As Lyra took the stage, her translator hummed to life. When I first came to Earth, Lyra began, her voice clear and steady. I thought I was here to study human biology. I was fascinated by your species' ability to adapt and grow stronger through stress. What I discovered instead was something far more valuable. The holographic displays behind her showed images from her early research, including her first awkward attempts to understand human physiology. Some audience members chuckled at the recording of her trying to measure Kim Dae's muscle density during lunch. My journey taught me that understanding a species means more than collecting biological data, she continued. It means respecting their culture, their boundaries, and their way of life. Lyra presented their groundbreaking findings about the similarities between human cellular regeneration and ancient Centaurian genetic patterns. But now, instead of just showing raw data, she wove it into a story of discovery and mutual understanding. She described how the accident with Kim Dae had changed everything. Watching my friend recover showed me something our instruments couldn't measure: the connection between physical and emotional resilience in humans. Kim Dae smiled from his seat, remembering those difficult days and how their friendship had grown stronger through the crisis. The presentation moved on to their practical applications. Lyra explained how they had developed new treatments for Centaurian genetic degradation based on human healing mechanisms. But more importantly, she showed how their research methods had created new ways for different species to work together. We discovered that respect for cultural boundaries doesn't limit scientific progress. It enhances it, Lara explained, her scales showing patterns of deep wisdom. When we understand and honor our differences, we can achieve things neither species could do alone. Park Sun, sitting next to Kim Da, nodded in approval. The cultural exchange protocols they had developed were already being adopted by research institutions across the galaxy. As Lyra reached her conclusion, her scales shifted to a color few in the audience had seen before. A deep, rich gold with swirls of blue and purple. It was the Centaurian expression of profound understanding and gratitude. This research began with my fascination with human biology, she said, but it ends with something far more precious, a model for how different species can work together, learn from each other, and grow stronger through understanding. The applause that followed wasn't just polite academic recognition. It was genuine appreciation for a breakthrough that went beyond scientific discovery. Human and Centaurian audience members alike understood that they were witnessing something special. After the presentation, Kim Da found Lyra surrounded by scientists from both worlds. She was answering questions not just about the research, but about how they had managed to bridge the cultural gap so effectively. "You did it," Kim Da said when he finally got a moment alone with her. "You found a way to help both our species." Lyra's scales showed happy patterns. "We did it together. Your patience with my cultural mistakes, Park Sun's guidance, Professor Han's support. It all mattered." The research program they had built became a template for future xenobiological studies. Their protocols for respectful cross-species research were adopted by institutions across the galaxy. But more importantly, they had shown that scientific progress didn't have to come at the cost of cultural sensitivity. In the days that followed, as Lyra prepared to return to Centaurus Prime, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. She was no longer the eager young researcher who saw humans as fascinating specimens. She had learned to see them as people first, with their own boundaries, customs, and dignity. "Will you come back to visit?" Kim Da asked during their farewell gathering. Lyra's scales showed a pattern of warm friendship. "Of course, we still have more to learn from each other. And this time, I promise not to try scanning you without permission." They both laughed, remembering how far they had come. Their work had proven that the greatest discoveries happen when scientific curiosity is balanced with cultural respect. In bridging the gap between their species, they had created something truly remarkable, a way forward for all species to learn from each other while honoring their differences. As Lyra prepared to leave Earth, she knew she was taking with her something more valuable than any research data. The understanding that true science isn't just about studying life, but about respecting it in all its diverse forms.